Before our in-game character was traveling to different worlds to save them from destruction, before we were liberating countries and ending a 1,000-year-long war of revenge, before we were even known as the Warrior of Light, we gained our fame and reputation as an adventurer by slaying the powerful beasts known as Primals. Hello, I'm the Exarch, and welcome back to another episode of the Lore of Eorzea. Today, we're going to be talking about Primals, what they are, how they're summoned, and of course, why us killing them is so important. The Primals are the official band of Final Fantasy XIV, led by the game's composer, Masayoshi Soken. Wait, wrong Primals. The Primals are godlike beings entirely composed of ether that are summoned with the combination of faith, prayer, and buttloads of ether crystals, or other sources of ether. Now, Primals, being the first major and largest reoccurring threat in the game, are actually pretty well explained, but I still think there's some stuff I can go over here. We start off by being told that Primals are the gods of the beast tribes that they summon in times of desperation. It's not ever elaborated on, just kind of glossed over, but in general, tensions between the beast tribes and the city-states of Eorzea are usually high, and when it reaches a peak, sometimes the beast tribes will feel driven into a corner and summon their respective primal. It should be noted that not all members of a particular beast tribe race share the same values. In fact, the game lets you befriend many of the different beast tribes encountered in the game, usually by helping out a faction that separates itself off from the rest of the beast tribe, either because they understand the dangers of Primals, or because they're already considered outcasts. This description of Primals, that they're the gods of the beast tribes, fits well with the first three Primals encountered in the MSQ. Ifrit is the god of the Amalja, Titan is the god of the Kobolds, and Garuda is the goddess of the XIV. However, this description quickly starts to fall apart after we encounter the Great King Mogglmog. See, unlike the other Primals, Mogglmog was based off of a real person from a legend, rather than a god. Still, with enough faith in ether crystals, the Moogles of the Twelveswood were able to summon him. It is through this encounter that the Scions learn to broaden their definition of a primal. A primal is, in essence, any entity that stems from the faith or belief of a being or deity, a person's concept of that deity, and a large amount of ether. Gods and goddesses just naturally fit the concept and faith prerequisites rather well. The next unique primal we encounter in the story is Shiva. You see, rather than Shiva being summoned as a separate entity, she's instead summoned through Exarch. In other words, Exarch channels Shiva through her body and summons the primal around herself. Now, it's not explicitly stated, but it's at the very least heavily implied that the only reason she can do this while also maintaining her base personality afterwards is because she possesses the Echo, and therefore is incapable of getting tempered by Primals. We later find out that this Shiva case is even more unique because, although she was based off of a real living person, Exarch's version of Shiva is ultimately based off of her own twisted views on who Shiva was, and not the real Shiva. For starters, there's no way Primal Shiva possesses the real Shiva's soul, because Shiva's soul resides within Hraesvelgr. Also, Hraesvelgr pretty much up and tells Exarch off for pretending that her version of Shiva is in any way representative of the real person, and considering Shiva was really important to him, I'm pretty sure he knows what he's talking about on that front. Later in Heavensward, we also find out that Archbishop Thorton and the Heavensward can also summon primals around themselves, but this is a pretty unique case as well. By perpetuating the legend of the original King Thorton and his Knights 12 throughout Ishgard's history, they were able to accumulate enough of the prerequisite faith to summon them as primals. Now, what makes this different from Shiva is that Archbishop Thorton and his knights are never shown to possess the Echo, nor are they ever implied to have it, but none of them seem to be affected by summoning primals around themselves, a process which should by all accounts temper them. Now, it's possible Archbishop Thorton and his knights are already tempered, since by the time we see them use their primal forms, they seem relatively in control and comfortable with them, so it's possible this wasn't the first time they summoned them, and that they were already tempered well before we met them. But it's just interesting because their personalities, particularly Archbishop Thornton's, seem distinctly different from the other examples of tempered beings we've seen in the past. In late Heavensward and Stormblood, we also find out it's possible to use objects containing a lot of ether to summon primals as well, as Ilberd uses Nidhogg's eyes to summon Shinryu, and Susanna was summoned through mystical objects containing an abundance of ether. Now, the interesting thing about Shinryu is he seems to bypass the faith requirement for summoning a primal. Shinryu is basically a brand new primal, and was only called Shinryu because he resembled an old legend, which might be where his form came from, but seeing as none of the domans who started calling him Shinryu were part of the summoning process, I think it's just more of a coincidence he wound up looking the same. Tsukiyomi is also an interesting case, since Yatsuyu was able to summon her through a coach and relic, but she herself didn't worship Tsukiyomi. She was, however, aware that Tsukiyomi was a moon goddess, so it's possible she learned of Tsukiyomi's form from the mirror itself. It's also possible she was tempered by Tsukiyomi through her contact with the mirror, or the summoning itself, but we really don't see enough of her personality post-battle to tell for sure. The faith requirement for summoning a primal is also a bit odd because it's never specified how much faith is needed. In the Hildebrand questline, Gilgamesh is able to summon a primal version of Enkidu by himself pretty much by accident, and Shinryu, as mentioned before, wasn't really called upon based on any particular faith, just a manifestation of Ilburd's rage and the despair of those around him from the bloody battle that was going on at the time. It's possible that the faith requirement determines how strong a primal is, as Enkidu is a much less intimidating primal than, say, Garuda, though it's never confirmed and that's merely speculation on my part. Now, as I mentioned before, the Warrior of Light's ability to fight primals is a pretty big deal for two reasons. The first is because a primal's very existence is a pretty big problem. Primals are beings comprised entirely of ether, and constantly drain the environment around them for the ether needed to sustain themselves. This is problematic because, as I mentioned in my ether video, draining the environment of all its ether can create a dangerous wasteland where no plants or animals can survive. The second reason the Warrior of Light in specific is often called upon to get rid of these primals once they're summoned is because all primals are capable of a process generally referred to as tempering. The primal will bathe the target in their own ether, and that target will then become a brainwashed servant who will devote their lives to that primal. This happens regardless of whether the target was originally faithful to the primal or not, and there doesn't seem to be any way of resisting this apart from being tempered by another primal already, or possessing the echo. There's also no way of reversing a tempering, so basically once you get tempered, your options are living out the rest of your life as a thrall to whatever primal tempered you, or having someone mercy kill you. Also, technically speaking, tempering is specifically the term used to describe what Ifrit does to create his thralls, which involves breathing fire on his targets. But since this is our first example of this happening, and since the Scions themselves seem to use tempering to describe the process as a whole, there's really not a better blanket term for it. Now we're going to move into Shadowbringers spoiler territory. This one's going to be really short, but I figured I'd warn you guys anyway, so if you don't want to be spoiled with stuff revealed in Shadowbringers, please skip this last part. Since there aren't really any primals that show up in Shadowbringers, this one's really simple. We learn two pretty big things about primals. The first being that the process for summoning them is based off of the Ancients' creation magics, which is why the Ascians are able to teach the process to the beast tribes and others. And the second is that both Zodiark and Hydaelyn are also primals, just ones created before all the others by the Ancients. Both Zodiark and Hydaelyn seem to have required more than ether and faith to create, as Elidibus had to offer himself up to become the Heart of Zodiark, and it's implied an ancient named Venat had to do the same thing for Hydaelyn. Not only that, but it's implied a lot of Ancients had to give themselves up as sacrifices to even summon Zodiark, and that he would have needed constant living sacrifices to sustain himself, which is why Hydaelyn was summoned in the first place. People felt that this was too great of a cost, and that, combined with Emet-Selch's inevitable plans, the ones to sacrifice all new life created by Zodiark to bring back those they had lost, made some of the Ancients rebel against him. Aside from those two things, however, we don't really find out much about primals that I haven't already discussed. I guess it's cool that we find out that the process for summoning a primal is based on ancient creation magics, but we already knew that the Ascians were going around teaching the art of summoning, so it's not like that impacts the story in any significant way. There's also a short scene that implies the Scions might figure out a way to reverse tempering, but it's way too early to see if that's going to pan out at all. Still, I figured I'd at least mention that here too. With that being said, I'm going to end the video here. I did notice that my videos are getting a little more attention lately, and my subscriber count has been going up a lot faster in the past few weeks, so if you're new here, I wanted to thank you. I enjoy making these lore videos, and I'm sorry I'm not very fast at making them right now. There is an interesting project I've been talking to a friend about that might turn into something I think you guys will enjoy, but it's too early to say for sure if that will pan out, so I don't want to make any promises. If it does happen to work out, however, it does mean I'll probably be uploading a little more frequently, so hopefully I'm able to give you guys some good news on that front soon. In addition, I did want to remind everyone that I do stream Final Fantasy XIV content on Wednesdays at 9 PM EST. Me and my static, the Baka Rangers, are memeing our way through the current raid tier, so feel free to join in and watch our shenanigans. I try to stream 2 times a week, but Wednesdays is my only set stream day. I do try to announce other stream days on my Twitter a day ahead of time, and I also share Final Fantasy XIV memes and other stuff on there too. So feel free to follow me on there. The link to both my Twitch channel and my Twitter are down in the description. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or feedback, be sure to drop them in the comments below, and subscribe if you want more Final Fantasy XIV lore content. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.